improvement in student learning. So for Amarillo College, our outcomes assessment then was, as you can see on the picture on the right, stacks and stacks of hard copy artifacts, and that might be maybe how some of you are still doing assessment. In 2015, we decided to look into an online tool, and one that was in the LMS or learning management system that we already live in as faculty and students, and that is Blackboard. And so the tool is called Blackboard Outcomes Assessment. So we went from manual assessment of hard copy artifacts to assessing online. So basically all the students' work is there already, the faculty's working in Blackboard, so that's where we perform the sampling, the collection, and the assessment. So before now, we also didn't practice sampling methods, and so everything that you see on the right here in stacks for music and social sciences, they were assessing every student artifact across all the sections. So now we have the opportunity to put in a sampling formula in the actual outcomes assessment tool, and I'll show you all of this a little bit later. The analysis was also time-consuming and completed separately, whereas with the Blackboard tool, this is completed within the outcomes assessment tool. We lacked a structure for goal setting and also lacked the ability to close the loop or have that second reassessment. And so this has brought about much structure to our assessment cycle. So we're able to assess several of our Amarillo College assessment plan components with this tool. So we have the program level on your left there, where we have every department construct a curriculum map, which leads to the assessment of program student learning outcomes. And so this gives the departments and the faculty a hand in ownership of the assessment process because they're developing the learning outcomes. And then the institutional level, that's our general education competencies or learning outcomes. And those are things such as critical thinking, communication, empirical skills that most of you are familiar with by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. So for those program student learning outcomes, just to show you an example, this is what we have each department produce. This is a curriculum map. This is for our automotive programs. And so we assess our automotive program and other programs by having them map out the advanced courses or the major course requirements and our degree plans across the degrees in automotive technology. So we've got 2 certificates and an applied associate of science. And so we kind of map out all the courses, and then we look at what learning outcomes do we want our students to leave with, graduate with, go into industry with. And so these were most important to our automotive program. And then we map them to the courses. When are we introducing these learning outcomes? When are we developing and practicing with feedback? And when are we mastering these learning outcomes? So this became an important tool that we rolled out the same time we rolled out the Blackboard Outcomes Assessment. So we tie our program assessment in with that as well as our general education assessment. So we also align our assessment process and the use of this tool with SACSCOC Accreditation Standards, so 82A. As I just showed you on the curriculum map, those are defined by each department and faculty, so we use the assessment of these PSLOs with our curriculum mapping and this tool to be able to demonstrate compliance with this standard. And then we also use this tool for our general education learning outcomes, communication, critical thinking, all the way to teamwork here. Those are defined by the coordinating board, and those are our institutional student learning outcomes. So we build practices around the learning outcomes. This is again, the institutional learning outcomes or the general education competencies. So this is given to us by the state. And so we take a look at these different competencies we have to assess, and we break it down by courses into these component areas. So on the next slide here, we then break it down further. Here are component areas in Amarillo College's core curriculum. We need to assess teamwork for these areas: communication, creative arts, life and physical sciences. So we know exactly what courses we need to assess over the 10-year period that we collect these artifacts and assessment to be able to report that out to the coordinating board and to SACS as well every 10 years on general education assessment. So we get to see a view of what are all the courses that we need to assess over time should these courses remain in our core curriculum. Additionally, we build a practice around the development of planning templates, and so we want to hear from each department, typically working with the department chair or coordinator on what are the courses we're going to assess. And so they're able to tell us the term, the Blackboard course ID, title, and we try to assess every course section. And so we want to make sure that we're collecting artifacts and assessment data on all our off-campus instructional locations as well. So we're talking about high schools, correctional facilities, other campus locations that we have in the Panhandle here. Then they also tell us the assignment name and several faculty that can assess. Now I've changed this over time such that I see the same 20 to 30% of faculty performing the assessment. So now I kind of select the faculty and put more faculty on assessment, have more exposure to it, and building that institutional capacity for assessment. Again, building capacity, this is the tool itself that I've been talking about, the Blackboard Outcomes Assessment. So this is an example of what a course shell looks like in Blackboard and where we can perform the assessment and set it up. So let me show you that. So I have a course here in Blackboard. This is Introduction to Criminal Justice. And so every course down here on the left side menu has a common assessment button. And so if I click this, this is where you can put information for the students, but mainly what I'm looking for as an institutional effectiveness professional and someone that does the assessment for the college, I'm looking for this drop box. And so the faculty members have to create this drop box and upload their instructions, and then the students upload their work here as well. And then this is where I go behind the scenes and I tie in the goals and learning outcomes and rubrics. And so here for criminal justice, it's in the core, we're assessing critical thinking and communication. And so we have to make sure that those three things happen where we set up the Dropbox, we attach the instructions, and then of course I go behind the scenes and attach what we need to be able to assess the work. And so it's pretty straightforward once a faculty member knows how to create a Dropbox in their class in Blackboard. It's pretty much the same for common assessment. This is what we call the same assignment that's collected across all the course sections of, let's say, English 1301 composition. So all the course sections of 1301 will have that same common assignment or common assessment, and this is where I'll collect the work in this folder across all the sections. And this is how I developed the continuous improvement strategy for Amarillo College. This is just a snippet of a cycle for a couple of our competencies here. So you can look at critical thinking, empirical skills, and it gives you an idea over a 5-year time period when we're doing what. So basically students are uploading the work, we're identifying the courses, faculty are evaluating artifacts, and then the results are provided to faculty so they can seek improvements. And we spend a better part of an entire academic year being able to go over those assessment results with the faculty and the departments. We have about 52 departments that cover about 135 programs, and so we need to make sure that we reach out to each department and faculty and get them involved in this part of the process. We also collaborate with our Center for Teaching and Learning, and so that area you see in green here in 1920 where they're looking at data, they're also able to work with Center for Teaching and Learning on course redesigns. They're also taking sessions on faculty development, seeing how they can implement new student engagement techniques in the classroom, and all of this is built into the assessment process. And so we talk about seeking improvements, they can use their faculty development towards this process as well. And then, of course, we do a reassessment to see if those improvements have impacted student learning, good, bad, or indifferent, and make sure that we document this process. And then this is the Blackboard Outcomes Assessment tool again. And so this is how we set up goals, and they can include general education competencies, the program student learning outcomes from our curriculum map. You can also put accreditation standards in here, or your quality enhancement plan. You can set this up as any kind of goals-based system. Let me go out here and show you. And so if I want to set up all my departments, divisions here, our goal set is actually our divisions. So we've got general education, health sciences, liberal arts. And so under continuing education, we've got criminal justice. And this is where we start adding the goals. So these are those learning outcomes from the curriculum map. So we've got the main goal to graduate students who are able to constructively examine experiences, etc. And then we've got those child goals, or those specific measurable learning outcomes. So we've got 2 learning outcomes and 1 goal. Then we look at goal 2 for criminal justice, same thing. We've got 1 learning outcome there. And so this is how we set it up in this tool to be able to measure the goals and those specific learning outcomes by division and then by department. So here's health sciences, and then we've got all of the departments here with their goals and learning outcomes. And then we've got a specific one just for general education where we've got those 6 competencies. And those are set up in here as learning outcomes. And then we also have a place to set up rubrics. And so this also houses all of your rubrics, your scoring rubrics. And so we can search in here for anything from a program rubric to critical thinking. So here's all our critical thinking rubrics over time, and we've tweaked them over time. That's why there's so many instances here. We also have a separate one that we've adapted for math. And so you can do a search and pretty much look for anything. So we've got some program learning outcomes for dental programs, and so I could look up the dental program and see all of their rubrics that they've got here. So it's a nice one-stop shop to have all of your rubrics, all of your goals, and then all of your assessment items. And so, how do we perform the actual assessment? And so these 3 criteria have to be in place in Blackboard Outcomes. The students have to upload the work into a common assessment Dropbox. So we have to teach the faculty how to create that Dropbox, how to get the students to use it. A lot of the times faculty are using different modules within their Blackboard course, and they're not used to this separate assessment box. And so this has taken some training over time as well. So faculty also attach instructions to the Dropbox, and we do that because a session is created when we have the students' work, the faculty instructions, and then the alignments. And so if I'm assigning 3 or 4 faculty to assess a course in the core curriculum, they need to know what was expected of the student at the time. And so we make sure that the instructions go along with the artifacts. And then institutional effectiveness attaches those alignments to the Dropbox. An email from Blackboard is generated to all faculty evaluators to begin their assessment, and I give them about 3 to 4 weeks to assess the student work. I don't believe this video is going to work, so I'll make sure I give this to you at the end, but I can take you through what that looks like in the tool. And so let's look at an assessment session for psychology. So when we have collected across sections of Psychology 2301, you can see on the screen here that the instructors of the, let's see here, 3, 6, we've got 8 sections of Psych 2301 that we collected across those 8 sections. We ended up with 256 artifacts, and then we plug in a formula, what kind of sample size do we want to have out of that 256. This sample is then generated where you can see this becomes anonymized, and so these students' names will disappear and it becomes a random student ID number. So it anonymizes the sample as well. The faculty get to come in here and evaluate the student's work and have the rubric aligned with it. And so it looks something like this when they receive their email link from Blackboard. I usually preface them with an email before Blackboard sends them their link and says, this is coming, this is what you're evaluating and why. This is how many artifacts you'll have, this is the learning outcomes. So when they click their link, it takes them straight to this page. And they're able to evaluate a list of students and look at the rubric as well. So basically, they have the rubric and the students' work on the same page, and see if I can show that to you. So when they're in the system, they get to see the students' work and they line it up on the left of their screen, and then they've got the rubric, they line up on the right, and they get to click through and score points on where the students are achieving those learning outcomes. There's also an area here, it says feedback to learner. That's really feedback to the institutional effectiveness department, and will also end up in the data that the faculty receive. And so they also have an opportunity to tell us about artifacts if there was something incorrect or missing or some kind of problem with the session. So they give us feedback there too. So this is what it looks like when they get the link from Blackboard. They get to see the student work and the rubric on the same screen. Here's what it also looks like that I showed you earlier, but this is showing you all the students. You can select them all at once and assess them in one sitting, or you can select one student and just come back to it when you need to. It saves after each student that you evaluate. Okay, so after the faculty have completed the assessment, this tool also provides analysis and outputs. So we've got 2 reports that are generated, and so we get to see an Excel spreadsheet that contains the raw data of how the faculty scored, which is a great opportunity. If you've got faculty in a department working together on this, they can get together and do a kind of rubric norming and making sure that the faculty understood or understand the rubric they're going to use to perform the scoring of the student artifacts. We also get these data visualization graphs in PDF format, and this is one of the ones here that we're looking at. So the example that we're looking at is a great example to show how we can identify gaps in student learning. This was a department who's allowed me to use this, who is studying their program student learning outcomes regarding these 2 learning outcomes you see on the page here. And so basically out of a total overall points of 8 on the rubric, which meant it was 2 criteria because our rubric scores from 4 to 0, exemplary to insufficient. So on average, students were scoring 2.33 out of 8 possible points, or 20% performance on this rubric. This is even more telling. So we can help identify those gaps in student learning and measuring that extent of those achievement of learning outcomes, whether it's general education or in this case, program student learning outcomes. So related to their learning outcomes on their curriculum map, these were the 2 criteria on their rubric. And you can see here, it's very telling that the students here, as they were mastering this course, these learning outcomes, they're having a hard time being able to identify morning traditions. And so these were the assignments that we collected and assessed, and so we were able to talk with the faculty in the department and say there's something definitely going on here that we need to take a look at. These are areas for improvement. Let's talk about what happened here in the class and what we can do for next time. And then the final output here is a frequency distribution. And so the titles of our rubrics at the top here, exemplary to incomplete. And so we score from 4 to 0. And you can see the percentages in here. Most of the course lies in the lower categories, and especially for morning traditions, you've got 93% of the class in the 1 and 0 rating on this particular learning outcome. And so that was a problem for this program, and they went through a lot of redesign and took a look at this. Now they're in the 2-point range as far as being on the 4 to 0 point scale. And so this kind of outputs from this tool works great for us, and it's very telling as far as identifying those gaps in student learning. This was some feedback we received after going through the first cycle of this tool. Most faculty felt good about using this instead of trying to get everyone in one room to assess all the artifacts. They thought it went smoothly. This way, each faculty member is receiving a link through email to perform the assessment on their own. And so that was more efficient for them than getting in a room together and spending a whole day assessing everything by hand and coming to a consensus on a score. Now they're doing it individually. And then, of course, it takes plenty of time, as one faculty member mentioned here, of training. And so I went through several training sessions of an introduction to this tool, how to develop rubrics. So we had to discuss how rubrics are different from grading rubrics we may have in the class. So that was a training session. So this tool allowed me to provide different trainings along the way as we got more and more into using this tool with faculty. And this is part of our improvement strategy in closing the loop. So we get to set up this cycle around assessment, analyzing those results, identifying those improvements, implementing them, and reassessing. So that goes along with the cycle I showed you earlier, which is kind of a 5-year cycle. It takes us about 3 years to get through an assessment and reassessment to close the loop. So another important component of our assessment process is that we build capacity by increasing faculty engagement. When I first started out in this role in 2017, one of the first mistakes I made, very easy mistake, is to talk with the academic leaders only for the most part, so with the chairs and coordinators. But it's very important that faculty are part of this process. They're teaching the classes. They need to have input. So communication was an important part for me in rolling this out. So while we have 52 departments and over 135 programs, when we talk about the data and the outputs I just showed you, it's important to not only have leadership at the table, but to have faculty at the table, and just make sure that each step of this process is clicking with faculty along the way, and so that they have also input, because these are the courses that they're teaching. They should be seeing the data. And so communication is a big part of this process. Having those one-on-one conversations with every department is time-consuming, but we also built in that year in our assessment cycle so that we can do this and make our rounds to the departments and have these discussions. Leveraging technology is another important pillar of our assessment process. So we use this Blackboard tool, and we also use these institutional research data dashboards, which I'll show you. So we collaborate with institutional research, and being able to have all sorts of institutional data at the fingertips of everyone. We also collaborate with the Center for Teaching and Learning, as I talked about earlier briefly. So we build them into the assessment cycle. So we have quite a bit of resources that we can use with faculty development that gives them time to reflect on the results and be able to utilize some of the things that they've learned with the Center for Teaching and Learning, whether it's implementing new student engagement techniques or high impact practices. They're able to use what they learned throughout the year with CTL in the assessment process as well. So we try to communicate to faculty and leadership that assessment is in its own silo, that we're collaborating with institutional research and with Center for Teaching and Learning, and it's all part of the same process of seeking improvement. And then we also incentivize our faculty develop model, and I'll make sure that you get these links and these slides afterwards as well if you'd like them. And you could take a look at our resources and our faculty development model Let me see if I can go out there now for you, just to give you an idea. So we've got resources here for them. We've got a catalog that goes over all of the sessions for faculty. Also assessment sessions are in here. I'm the first one here on the page. And then we've got engagement techniques, teaching for transformation. That's an entire institute that we offer to faculty. And we'll do that year to year. We've got lunch and learns, information about Blackboard help. And so Google for Educators certification, and so that's something that is there for faculty as well. And then we've got stipends that we have for our faculty as well, where they can apply. So every time that they're attending a session, whether it's on assessment or these other ones that I showed you, they're getting points towards a stipend. So we incentivize our faculty development model. So building capacity around assessment and around Blackboard outcomes, like I said earlier, we work with institutional research, and so we've got these data resources for faculty. And sorry, I'm switching back and forth on you, but I want to show you our resources here. So this is an example of our resources for faculty. So IDS is our student course success. So faculty, along with their assessment data, can go in here and look at the analytics behind their course success. What are my ABC rates of my students, and also get that information by demographics. Enrollment dashboard, and then this was built for assessment program review. So we do this every 2 years as a component of our assessment to look at the overall health of our programs. And so it's very important that institutional effectiveness collaborates with institutional research. And this is just an example of a faculty member using Blackboard outcomes to assess their general education competencies. So this is Intro to Criminal Justice. She set up her common assessment box here, providing more information to her students, but she's also got the drop box here at the bottom. And then these were her scores. This was for empirical and quantitative skills, and so these were her scores. She wanted them to be a little bit higher. And so after a reassessment, basically she took a look at these scores and she implemented a technique that she learned through faculty development, and that was the TILT framework. So I think it's transparency and learning and teaching, the TILT framework. And basically we provide the students with a template and show them how to complete the assignment. We're just more transparent with the students. And so after we did that, this is an example of how we close the loop in the documentation process on a particular learning outcome. So for this example, she's closing the loop on empirical skills for criminal justice. This was her original scores, 2.6 out of 4. After she implemented the transparency and learning and technique and teaching technique framework into her class, these are some of the things that she implemented. Now she's got new results where the students improved by at least 10% in this area. And so she's able to tell her assessment story by using this very condensed template of what's my learning outcome, how am I using the results to seek improvement, what are my new results, and then having a final discussion. And so this is an example of how we close the loop at AC with our documentation as well. And this aligns with our compliance of SACSCOC standards on general education and program outcomes. So her perspective and some helpful hints and improvements from this professor is that she utilized student engagement techniques from Center for Teaching and Learning. She made use of an assignment she already had in the class, and so I don't expect faculty to have to develop new assignments just for the sake of assessment, so we try to use important assignments that exist in the class. So she used the capstone assignment, and she designed a high quality, efficient assignment. It was also a signature assignment, so she's able to use that same assignment to assess more than one learning outcome. So she assesses critical thinking, communication, empirical skills. And then an important note that she has for other faculty is to make sure you train your faculty evaluators, that they know how to get the students to upload the work. They understand the rubric that they're using to score the work. And so training was an important piece for her and her department. And again, building capacity, faculty development being a focal point of our student success. So ensuring that we build time in the assessment cycle for faculty to reflect upon the data and other opportunities for improvement, and that we have collaboration, so faculty development opportunities, and that this process is data-driven, so the use of assessment data and results to make informed decisions. So not anecdotal, but making sure that we're using the data and revisiting it when we do a reassessment. And then having those faculty-led improvement strategies, so it's not just between the institutional effectiveness or assessment professionals and the department chairs, but making sure that faculty is involved in this process. We have about 200 full-time faculty, 200 part-time faculty at AC, and with this last cycle, I had about 120 of the full-time faculty involved in some phase of assessment and about 10 part-time faculty, and so that was a huge increase compared to the 20% we had when we first started. And so at this time, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Do we have any questions? I didn't get any in writing in the chat area. I can try to unmute everybody. I'm not able to do that.
Yeah. And I'd be happy to send these materials and links to everyone, either through Leap Texas listserv or how to do them.
We have a question, well, no, a comment. Seems fairly straightforward.
Oh, thank you. And hi, Marlon.
Can you go back to the section on evaluating student artifacts where raters were raters assigned from outside the course?
Okay, good question. It depends on the learning outcome. Let me go back here. Let's see here. I think that was outside at another link here. But in terms of evaluating student artifacts, if we're talking about assessing critical thinking or communication, if we're looking at a class, let's say economics or geology. Let me use geology because it's a smaller section. So I've got one main geology professor. So how do we assess artifacts so we don't have just the professor of record assessing their own student work, because we don't want to introduce that bias into the equation. And so we make sure that we can pull faculty from other departments that can help us, because if we're all teaching, then we can assess critical thinking and communication, but we just need to be aware of the instructions and what was expected of the students. And so, yes, sometimes we have faculty from across disciplines helping each other evaluate student artifacts. Now, when it comes to assessing the PSLOs or the program learning outcomes, that does have to be from the department itself. And so if we've got smaller programs, let's say in health sciences, sometimes we have to reach into the advisory board. And so advisory board members may help us with assessment. I'm trying to get them involved more in the process because they do have a say in our curriculum as well when we talk about technical programs. And so, yes, we do try to reach across to other disciplines when we need to, and we have smaller programs. In the larger areas, such as English and biology, we have plenty of faculty in those areas, and so we try to have the microbiology faculty assess maybe a different type of biology and not assess their own students. So we try to eliminate that bias. Thank you. Any other questions about our process or the tool in general?
Yes, there's another question. Are the data dashboards provided by institutional research done with Blackboard or from data merge with the institutional system?
It's a data merge from the institutional system. So from our student information system, we use Colleague. And so it's all built in-house. And so that comes from our SIS. It's not talking to Blackboard right now, but we are getting into Blackboard Analytics as well. So we'll have that information to share. But yeah, that's all in-house, the homegrown system, yes.
And I would say that I am recording the presentation. It will be made available on the Leap Texas website. And also, Tina, if you'll provide the PowerPoint to me, I will make sure that that gets on the Leap Texas website also. And I'll send the link out to both of those things.
I'll do that. Another comment about the data dashboards, they're now outward facing. And so you'll be able to go out there and see what kind of data we collect on our students and how we do that. So that might be something useful for you as well.
Do we have any other questions? While you're thinking about questions, I'll just do a couple of advertisements. One is the next webinar is using curriculum mapping to help drive assessment plan design. That is scheduled for February the 26th at 11 a.m. To about noon. And Jeff Roberts from Sam Houston State University, he's the Director of Assessment there, will be presenting that webinar. If you haven't registered for that, I'll send out the announcement again on the Leap Texas website. Be sure and register for that if you are interested in that webinar. The second advertisement that I would like to give is for the 7th Annual Leap Texas Conference, which will be in Houston from March the 29th to March the 31st. And we would like all of you to join us. If you haven't registered, you can find the registration information on the Leap Texas website. That is leaptex.org, leaptex.org. Any other questions? Lots of folks saying thank you.
Well, thank you for listening.
Well, thank you for doing this, Tina. If you have other questions that you were hesitant to ask or maybe you didn't think would be relevant to everybody else, Tina's information is up on the screen. You can take that information down. Also, as I said, we will have the video on the Leap Texas website and also the PowerPoint on the Leap Texas website. Thank you very much, Tina, for doing this presentation today. It was very informative. I enjoyed it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for everybody for joining us. Thank you.